In this video we're going to deal with entrepreneurship skills, and we're going to start this by looking at attempts by the entrepreneur to resolve contradictions, to resolve opposites or problems. Sometimes when we think of entrepreneurship, we think of someone who is alert to opportunities, who's intelligent, who is an organizer, who's a problem solver. But sometimes the entrepreneur faces situations where extreme skill is required, trying to resolve issues. Sometimes the issues seem to be contradictory or opposing each other, and it's the skill of the entrepreneur that comes into play in the resolution of these issues, and that's what we want to work through first in this session. Take, for example, the issue of ambiguity. Well, in business there's a lot of ambiguity, there's a lot of vagueness involved in business. For a start, the future is unknowable, according to a famous economist, Friedrich von Hayek. We don't know the future, we can guess at it. We also probably don't know the present, because there's too much information in the system for us to know everything. And this means that we are ambiguous, we're confused about what the right course of action is. Now, if we contrast that with a world in which there was absolute certainty, then it would be simply a problem of planning, simply a problem of organizing resources to be in the company at a certain time, to make a certain product, make a certain amount of the product, because we had a good idea of what the customers were going to purchase, and so on. That's not really the world in which we live, but that would be a nice planned world. So we can see there's ambiguity versus planning. We can see that we live more towards the world of ambiguity and vagueness, and trying to work out what the best solution is in the absence of hard facts and real knowledge. So it's a very skillful activity to try and maneuver a business through time, facing ambiguity, facing vagueness and uncertainty and confusion and all the issues that can arise in the practical world in which we live. The planning approach seems to be much easier. The planners know what the resources are, know what needs to be produced, know how many the machines can produce, know what the managers can handle. It seems like the planning world is simply trying to solve a problem, solve an almost a mathematical problem, whereas the ambiguous world of the entrepreneur is much more complex. The entrepreneur has no idea about what the future is like, or what the demand will be like, or whether the design will be acceptable. He or she, of course, can engage market research activities to try and shed light on what they're doing, but they are quintessentially facing a very vague situation, and that's a big contrast, and that's what the entrepreneurs are trying to bridge. They're trying to move from that extreme vagueness across into a more planning environment, one in which the company can operate. There's also a contrast between creativity and discipline. Creativity requires freedom of action and freedom of thinking. It requires experimentation. It requires the facility and the ability to have ideas and to test them out. Now contrast that with the world of discipline, one where they simply follow the rules as the rules are right now. That's the discipline. The rules are set out, therefore everyone follows those rules. There is no deviation from the rules. That's the world of discipline. The world of creativity is constantly trying to alter what is happening, alter the product, alter its design, vary some aspect of the product, trying out new ideas. So there's again a big contrast between the two approaches. One, leave it alone. That is the product. That's what the company makes. The other one, experiment with it. Try it. Change it. Constantly tinkering around with the product to try and get a better product. There's also this idea of urgency and patience. The organization likes to work in a calm environment where everything is planned out, everything is set out in advance, everything is planned, deliveries into the business, the marketing personnel will project what the sales will be. Everything is worked out carefully and patiently, set out, cool, calm and collected. The urgency approach is this of the entrepreneur, constantly and almost manically trying out new ideas, trying out just varying something to try and get something new in position. And there is an urgency trying to make sure that they're out competing the competitors, making sure that they're meeting the customer requirements, making sure that they can anticipate future customer requirements. So again, a big contrast between the two approaches, and we can see where the entrepreneur is falling in this one. And there's flexibility versus organization. The organization approach is to imagine an organizational chart where all the departments are collected, and within the departments there will be different functions. The functions will be set out clearly. Who's in charge of each function will be set out. So there is absolute certainty looking at the organization, who's doing what. You could even imagine it across time, who's doing what on a particular day. Contrast that with flexibility, the entrepreneur and the more creative personnel who want to constantly vary the organization to find a better way, to find a better structure for the organization. But in order to change it, they may get it wrong, they may get it right. Sometimes they haven't got hard information about what changes are required. So they are relying on their entrepreneurial abilities, on their ability to project what they think is the right solution, the most creative solution, the one which will have long-term benefits for the organization. But of course, that is strictly opposed by the organizationalists who want to maintain the structure, because there is absolute certainty about the organization, its design, its functions, who's doing what, where people are allocated, where resources are allocated. Contrast that with the flexibility, trying to engineer the business towards a more flexible working environment, one where they are capable of taking on changes when changes happen in the environment in the future. Responsiveness versus systems. Entrepreneurs want to be able to respond to changes in the market. They want to be able to lead the changes in the market, in fact. They want to view the customers and see what the customers are thinking and what they're doing, and try to lead the customers, and preferably lead the customers towards the product that they are making. The systems approach is to try and get the customers to fit in with what the organization is doing. This is the product that the organization is making, and it's more or less take it or leave it. The responsiveness is coupled with the flexibility and the creativity and so on we talked about. The responsiveness is being able to switch over plant and machinery and resources to respond quickly to the changes in the market, as opposed to having an ossified system, one which is fixed in stone, fixed because that is the way the company always does it. That is inflexible. So the company wants to be responsive to any changes or any fluctuations in the market, and be responsive very quickly. Taking risk versus risk management. Well, entrepreneurs take risk. That's essentially what entrepreneurs do. They are constantly looking for new products, new designs, new ways of producing. All of this involves risk because the output that they're going to produce may be rejected by the customers. The customers may not like it. The entrepreneurs thought it was good, but the customers may not. So there's always a risk in what the entrepreneurs are doing. But if the entrepreneurs get it right, then there is the potential there to lead the market and to beat the competitors. But we can contrast that with risk management, where the management are trying to get rid of risk, to avoid risk, in case the risk is adverse and will damage the business. So entrepreneurs on the one hand embrace risk. They're constantly dealing with risk and engaging in risky activities. Risk management, trying to work out where the risks are and trying to minimize the risks. Again, a big contrast between the two approaches. And of course, short-term versus long-term. We can look at this from two angles, but the entrepreneurs tend to look short-term because they're making short-term changes, which can feed into the production system once they're being accepted by the customer, once they're seen as good innovations, and they'll become long-term production items for the business. So the business is more concerned with long-run approaches, trying to buy in capital which will last for many years, train up personnel in particular ways of working, which will again should last for many years. The short term is the entrepreneur constantly making changes and making proposals for change to the product, to the production system, constantly trying to innovate and modify what is happening, all of which will require resources, retraining, new equipment perhaps. So the entrepreneur is working in this short-term environment. Management tends to want to work in the long term. But as I said, there are two sides to it. You could turn this one around and say that the business has a short-term commitment to many products, which it may see as running out, their shelf life running out, and put a long-term commitment to entrepreneurship, the activity of entrepreneurship, not necessarily the output from entrepreneurship, but they understand the importance of entrepreneurship. However, of those two views, the first one I mentioned, with entrepreneurship dealing with immediate changes and trying to engineer products and designs which are market leading proposals. Contrast that with a long-term view of management who want to buy machines which are going to last for years and buildings that are going to last for years and so on. So there's short-term, long-term contrasts. Now, let's look at the skill assessments of entrepreneurs, and we'll do this in two parts. But by this, let's look at the ability, the skills set of the entrepreneur. Well, it's the ability to accurately perceive unmet customer needs. That is the overriding, I think, attribute of the entrepreneur. It's trying to imagine what the customer wants or needs, but is not currently getting. And it's then designing a product that will accurately match what the customer wants, even though perhaps the customer, him or herself, does not understand what they want. The entrepreneurs will produce a product that will, when it hits the market, will be seen as very desirable on the part of the customers. So it's the ability of the entrepreneur to perceive the unmet customer needs, and that's a very important skill. It's the ability to seize high quality business opportunities. It's a question of understanding what's happening within the market and being able to see advantages in areas that perhaps others can't see, and then exploiting those advantages to the benefit of the business. Of course, none of this can be trained. You can't train people to do this. This is somehow part and parcel of being the entrepreneur. Some people can do it, most can't. But some people can look at the industry, look at the companies within the industry, look at the configuration of the companies, can see advantages out of certain patterns of activity, and can get an advantage within the industry. So they're looking at business opportunities. The ability to recognize goods or services that will be successful in the marketplace. More or less anyone can conceive of products or services, but not all the products and services will be successful. Many will fail. It's having a good record in predicting the requirements of the market and producing products and services that are actually wanted or needed. That's the trick. And entrepreneurs can do that. And successful entrepreneurs can do it many times over. How they can do that is essentially a mystery. Some people can do it, some people can't. And that would take us into a different discussion about the nature of entrepreneurship. Whether it's nature, it's within the person, or it's nurture, it's being taught to that person. And that is a debate that's not been resolved. They must have the ability to communicate business objectives in writing. Being able to express the ideas verbally is good, but being able to succinctly produce in writing the proposals, that is extra good, because that means there is a hard copy of the proposal that may be scrutinized by senior management, may be scrutinized by all the relevant people who are associated with the proposal, and they can see clearly from the written document what is being proposed, and they're able to have time to reflect and think over what's been written and go back and seek clarification. But the ability of the entrepreneur to be able to write the document, to make the proposal, is a requirement. The ability to articulate the business objectives to key people outside of the business. It's important that entrepreneurs can communicate to people outside of the business. Entrepreneurs, in a sense, represent the business, but they also, in a sense, represent the product or the service, and represent the value for money of the product or service, and the advantages or benefits flowing from having that particular product or service. So they become the spokespeople, or the spokesperson, I should say, for that particular product. So they represent the business, or probably better said, they represent the product to people outside of the business. Generally speaking, they're quite skilled at writing formal business plans. They have an idea, they think what's required to bring the idea into fruition, to deliver this product, and then they will set about working out what capital, what resources, what personnel, what are the financial implications of doing this, what would a likely cash flow look like, and so they tend to be quite skilled in writing business plans. They can turn the vision for the business into a formal strategy. Having got a vision for a business, having decided this is the product that should be made and this is the design that should be followed, they can then turn that into a formal strategy a strategy which will take on the competitors, one which will position the product competitively in the market, one which will lead to market success. So they should be able to move from the business plan, from the early stages of articulating what the product should be or the design should be, into moving towards a formal strategy that the business can follow, which will help the business to realize gains flowing from that development. Should be able to perceive accurate formal financial forecasts for the business. They should be able to prepare, I should say. It's not a question of being an accountant. It's a question of understanding the setup costs, the likely cash flow, the break-even. Looking at essential documents such as those, which will help the entrepreneur in working out whether the proposal is feasible or not at a very early stage before too much resource is committed. And if nothing else, at least those documents will set out the parameters within which the entrepreneur must work. They must know that the variable cost of production cannot exceed a certain amount, because if it does, the chances are the break even will be unrealistic. So they must look carefully at financial forecasts and be able to deal with those financial forecasts and develop those financial forecasts themselves. They should be able to work out carefully what is required. Now let's look at skill assessment set 2. Well, this is the ability to involve people with important resources. Sometimes when entrepreneurs come up with an idea, they may need particular skilled personnel to be able to develop that idea. Well, they should be able to engage those people and let them see the vision of the product, be able to articulate it to them so that they can understand what the product is and what it's likely to do, and will become involved as a consequence. They should be able to develop a venture team with complementary competencies. Now, a venture team means they should be able to look at developing a team for the product, perhaps engineers, accountants, project managers, marketing personnel. They should be able to develop a team around which this product will start to take shape, and through regular meetings, I should say, they're able to refine the idea, polish the idea, and eventually bring it into production and launch it. So the venture team have complementary competencies. They're able to talk to each other, they're able to shed light on each other's perspective, and they're able to criticize proposals constructively, but criticize them nonetheless. They're able to refine the proposals and bring the whole ideas forward. They should have the ability to organize and motivate people. Entrepreneurs should be quite charismatic characters. They should be able to have leadership skills which enable them to bring others on board. Others become inspired by them. They're able to organize and motivate people through this ability that they have got, that the others will follow. And they should be able to delegate effectively. They should be able to work out who can do certain jobs and then delegate those jobs and not take on the whole project themselves. It depends, of course, on the size of the project, but by and large, not take on the whole project, but be able to delegate and have regular feedback from those delegated areas and bring it all together. They should be able to keep the organization running smoothly. It's important that the whole organization is running whilst in the background this development is taking place. They should have the ability to organize resources and coordinate tasks. It's important that they know what resources are available to develop a product or develop an idea or change a design or whatever it is. They know what resources are available. They should be able to work within that envelope of resources, and they should be able to coordinate tasks by setting up a team and then coordinate the tasks and do it all within the budget. They should be able to supervise and influence and lead people. That really is what was mentioned above. But it's important that it should be able to be involved at different levels, in different activities, and understand the issues and the problems that are faced by people dealing with specific parts of the project, and bring support to those people when required, and problem solve. Perhaps widen the team so as more expertise can be brought in, and they should be able to influence people and lead the people so that there is a coherence to the team. They're all pulling in the same direction. They're not pulling against each other, or not meeting deadlines or holding each other up. There's a coherence about the whole activity. They should be skilled at organising the resources available to achieve maximum effect. So it's not just a question of working within budgets, it's a question of taking the resources that have been allocated through the budgets for this particular project and then maximising the impact of that expenditure. Maximising it so as to get the most out of it. And the entrepreneur is the person who should be most effective at getting value for money, and not just bringing in the project, but perhaps bringing it in under budget. The ability to manage the cash flow of the business, or of this particular aspect of the business. It's important that this particular activity does not run short of resources, run short of finance before its completion. So everything there should be a time scale, and the cash should be allocated in a way that enables the business to succeed. They should be skilled at successfully managing business expenses. That's part of the cash flow point. They should be able to manage business expenses. They should be able to monitor expenditure. They should be able to look for synergy in the expenditure patterns, and where resources can be used in one area, perhaps they could be used in a different area as well. It could be that equipment that's bought for one area could be shared with another area. You don't have to duplicate the expenditure. It's important in a sense that common sense is used, but also that there is critical appraisal of all expenditures and justification for all expenditures. And there is a clear understanding of what the expenditure is for and why it's necessary. Should be skilled at controlling business costs. It's not just a question of looking at the resources that go into a particular project, but there may be overheads involved. They may be taking up company space. They may be taking up utilities, electrics and heating, and perhaps they may be taking up part of the administration or part of the office space. It's a question of controlling overall cost, not just the cost of the project, the prime cost of the project, but looking at the overall cost of the situation and trying to ensure that the project or the business is brought in or achieved within the allocated budget. They should have the ability to control the efficiency of operations. Entrepreneurs should know what is reasonable in terms of effort expended. They should understand what's required to get a particular output, what effort is required, what resources are required, what capital, what labour, what raw materials. And they should know or have some idea about the efficiency of the operation. That's the ratio of the output to the input. And if the ratio of the output to the input is low, then either changes has to be made, or perhaps there has to be some overarching critical review of the whole project to see if it's worthwhile carrying on. So we've got two sets of skills for the entrepreneur that we've looked at, in addition to looking at some of the contradictions and approaches used within business, particularly when looking at developing a new product or varying an existing product or changing a design or whatever it is. So we have the impact of the entrepreneur who is more creative in thinking and more open about what's required, and his or her approach is much less controlled and less routinized. There's less routine to their work. But contrast that with the standard approach to business, which is to plan, to regulate, to understand, to monitor, and it's quite different. The planning and more formal framework is useful once the business is settled and once the product has got a market, and if there is confidence that that market is going to persist. If the market is going to change, then the role of the entrepreneur becomes critical, because the business will need new products, new designs to meet the changing market demands. So both parts are important. And the skill sets we've looked at the end of this session simply just specify the types of skills that entrepreneurs need, which some of them look managerial, being able to delegate effectively, for example, or to manage cash flow. But these are skills that entrepreneurs have. And these are skills that entrepreneurs use in making the case for changing a product or introducing a new product or a new design. So they are part of the skill sets that are generally considered to be desirable in good entrepreneurs. But that's all we're going to deal with in this session, so let's leave it at that and say thank you for watching.